No one wants to talk about death until it happens to them. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Death Stories Living Truth. This story is brought to you by Round Trip Death. So if you want to see the full episode, definitely go check out Round Trip Death. Let's get started.
In this episode, imagine a pastor, now hospital chaplain, dealing with cancer 4 times and having multiple near-death experiences. What would he experience in his NDEs, and what advice does he have for other clergy? What can we learn from these experiences, and how can a belief in the afterlife provide hope for your life right now? It's time for Round Trip Death. I'd like to welcome our very special guest today, David McGinley, coming to us from, long ways away, but I'm going to let you talk about that, David. How are you today?
I'm doing really well. Great to see you.
It's great to see you. Tell everybody where you live and what you do.
So I'm in Halifax, Nova Scotia. So eastern seaboard and then some out into the ocean. And it's a cold winter's night here. I'm what's called a psycho-spiritual surgeon, sort of a psychologist who has deep awareness of the spiritual dimensions or the existential dimensions of identity and consciousness and of reality itself. That's what I do, and I support people facing the crises that life will inevitably bring. I worked for 25 years in the hospital. I was a chaplain in palliative and cancer and intensive care. I have supported thousands of people on the edge of immortality and just learned and grown so much from everything they've taught me. And now I have this private practice, and I'm an author, and
Wow, how interesting. I am so excited to learn what did he learn from all those years of caring for people in hospice and in palliative care, because those people know they're at the end of their life. So I am so sure he learned so much. I'm so excited.
I produce some online content, and I like to relax with my cat in the sunshine and have a nice cup of coffee in the morning and walk in this beautiful city, drink in the sea air and the sunshine. Even on a cold day, it's a beautiful thing.
And isn't that important? Those are the most important things. Exactly what he's talking about. Getting to enjoy his cat and getting to walk around his beautiful city and take in the sights, whether the weather is nice or whether it's cold. Those are the important things.
I remember, don't you have some pastoral duties as well?
Well, I did. I had a church for 10 years. I'm a Lutheran pastor. Then I had a parish in a little fishing village called Lunenburg, Nova Scotia, and I was there for about a year and really enjoyed. It's the oldest Lutheran congregation in Canada, and beautiful people.
That's fantastic. And speaking of that, it wasn't until I saw you face to face today, because the other day we just spoke on the phone. Face to face, I figured out where I remembered you from. And correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't you on a panel discussion at IONS in Phoenix?
Yes, I've been a member of the International Association for Near-Death Studies, and I was on a clergy panel in Phoenix.
Wow, that's so cool. I just learned about IONS, and I am so fascinated. That is definitely a goal of mine, is to make it to an IONS conference for sure.
Nixon, we were talking about how, ironically, clergy, who should be experts in near-death experiences and the nature of the afterlife, are very unfamiliar with the prevalence of the phenomena. One of the things I like to do is conduct workshops for clergy and raise awareness of how very real the hope is that we proclaim every Sunday, but how broad it is, far beyond the box of any one faith tradition.
Well, I was in the audience that day, and if I remember right, you were hilarious. Now, you seem very calm and mild-mannered here, just the two of us, but in front of hundreds of people, you were pretty funny.
Well, the adrenaline gets going, right? I vividly remember that presentation. I had a lot of fun at that. There's a lot that we can laugh at about ourselves, both as individuals and as clergy and as church. And that was a delightful experience. I'm glad you also laughed along with us.
Well, I wish I could say I remembered a lot of the things that came out of your mouth. My memory isn't that good, but
Well, that makes two of us.
But I do remember laughing and it being a really good panel discussion that day. And I love having clergy on from time to time and getting a perspective from different viewpoints. And also, and we'll do this a little bit later after we hear about your near-death experiences, but also getting a perspective that you can share to help other clergy who may be listening. A lot of them need help. No offense to people out there, but like you said, it's something that a lot of clergy are really behind on and don't know that much about. I had an opportunity to be on a podcast a little while ago for, I think it was called the Planters Podcast. So it was all about people planting these individual churches all over. And it was fascinating speaking with them and got a lot of good feedback there. But anyway, enough of me talking. I want to jump into, I'm just looking at my notes here. You're a cancer survivor, which also led to some amazing experiences. Why don't you jump into that story?
Yeah. As a chaplain, I know cancer from both sides of the bed. I've had cancer 4 times. So I'm really lucky to be alive.
What? 4 times? How do you get cancer 4 times? That's crazy.
And it's not a kind of cancer that most people have. Cancer, we think of it as this vicious disease that spreads out or metastasizes and compromises the different organs and your metabolism. My cancer is called paraganglioma. This is a sort of a gelatinous tumor that grows. 90% of them grow on the adrenal gland, and they're called pheochromocytoma. And when they're elsewhere in their body, they're called paragangliomas. Mine, I had when I was 17, then 27, then 35, then 37. So this tumor makes a Molotov cocktail of chemicals: dopamine, norepinephrine, adrenaline, components of adrenaline. There's something called catecholamines. And these are very concentrated. So when your adrenal gland turns on, it triggers the tumor to explode. Most people die in about a minute. Smaller explosions feel like you got hit in the gut. Your heart is racing, you're sweating, and you collapse. I have collapsed. I don't know how many times because of the tumors. Now, the first one was in my bladder. So I was lucky. The metabolites flushed out in my urine. I didn't feel the anxiety and the fight or flight response from these massive levels of dopamine and other metabolites. The second one, 10 years later, was on my femoral artery. That's not good. When the tumor blows, remember, it's because your adrenal gland released some adrenaline. Now, what's the most anxiety-provoking things that you could possibly do? Public speaking. Well, I was a student minister getting into the pulpit every Sunday. That wasn't a good combination. A lot of times, I thought that I couldn't be a pastor, I couldn't do the job because I kept having these, what felt like anxiety attacks. And then one day, I was doing a hospital chapel service, and the tumor blew, and I went down. Now, a hospital chapel, that's a good place to...
Wow, that is terrifying. To have these bombs in your body that could just blow at any time, and then you just go down, you're just out. Oh my God.
Die. You got medical, you got spiritual, right? And that's where I had my near-death experience. I tell you, life-changing. Now, these tumors, you can't hit them with chemo or radiation because they grow so slowly and they have very thick cell walls, so they're resilient. You've got to go in there surgically and extract them, but then the surgical team are acting like a bomb squad. As soon as you manipulate the tumor, it's going to blow. So a lot of people die on the table. They have to lower your blood pressure to about 50 over 30 and hold it there through the operation. That's barely enough to keep your blood vessels puffed up. You know, when they're going to collapse. But then they hit the tumor, they pull it out, and it releases chemicals. Your blood pressure skyrockets. And that's giving you more headroom because they kept it so low. And then they give you other medications to bring that down again. It's sort of a roller coaster for a few minutes. And if you survive, okay, it's good.
It just sounds terrifying, knowing that you have these time bombs inside yourself.
Yeah, because even intense emotion is dangerous, right? Excitement.
What? Even intense emotion is dangerous. So any kind of anxiety, any kind of stress, any kind of excitement. Could you imagine like a jump scare? A jump scare could kill you.
Joy, anger, anything that gets the adrenaline really going, to feel can be fatal when you have a paranganglioma. So I'm very lucky to be alive, and I credit that to my doctors and of course to God and the angels and the unseen accompanied guardians and guides. And I must have been sent back for a reason. And I now, 30 years later, have an idea of what that reason was.
Tell us later.
Let's save it.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting. I wonder what's the reason?
Yeah, keep us in suspense. I'm going to make a note here so I don't forget to ask you about that. But let's get into the near-death experience itself. What happened?
Yeah, so I didn't have the tunnel, and I didn't see my body from above. That's common, but not in the majority of cases. I was suddenly on a grassy hill. I passed out just at the beginning of my sermon. I crash and I hit the floor, but I'm gone. And I'm on this grassy hill. One of the things that strikes me is that it was marked by such an utter sense of relaxation and a sense of being home, right? You hear that a lot from near-death experiencers.
Absolutely. It's one of the...
Yeah, I definitely hear that often. People say it feels like I'm home. Like wherever they go. Excuse me. Wherever they go is very familiar to them.
very common things.
And I think personally that refers to an existential integration. In my near-death experience, there wasn't any aspect of myself that I was suppressing. There wasn't a subconscious, there wasn't an ego. I didn't have a fractured framework of identity. It was integrated. So yeah, you're at home in yourself because now you know and you are yourself as you essentially are, not the story.
That's really fascinating. I never heard of it put that way, because now your ego's gone and you finally feel complete. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
We tell ourselves about ourselves, which is the ego, and not the critical voice, not any sense of limitation. There are no words for how utterly complete you realize that you are.
Can I ask a question right there? Not to second guess anything you're saying whatsoever, but some people tell me that feeling of home is more like this is where I came from. Okay, like a heavenly place they came from, now they're back there. You described it very differently.
I supplement what they said with my perspective, because I also felt utterly familiar with the place. I knew it. And when I was there, I was jumping up and down like a kid at Christmas, overjoyed, saying, I'm home, I'm home, I'm home, right? It's like I knew I had come back to the place I belong.
That's really interesting. So if you know that you felt like you were coming back, so I would assume that means that you were there before.
It's home. It's the inner and the outer, and there is no difference between the two. And I felt completely connected to everything, every blade of grass on that hill. And there was a tree at the top of the hill. There are no other trees. And I felt fully connected to that tree. And I could sense how that tree was pulling in the nutrients from the soil and the energy from the air. And I felt one with the air and the sky. But with it was this complete sense of final excitement and relaxation into such authenticity that I had never experienced before on Earth or in this form. And every time I talk about it, I feel homesick.
Give me more detail. You were jumping up and down.
Jumping up and down. There was someone there. There was a celestial entity. It was masculine. He felt like my best friend. I felt like I'd known him all of my life. It was great. And he simply said, "It's great to see you, David." And I said, "It's so great to be here. Come on, let's run to the tree." Right? I'm like a kid with his best friend. And he said, "No, you can't go up there." But that's common, right? In near-death experiences, there's often a boundary or point at which you can't go beyond. I knew if I got to that tree, I'd never come back here. I was pulled to that tree. But he said, "Let's talk. Things are going really well, David." And we had this conversation that felt so casual, so relaxed, so intimate. And yet I also could sense from him that this was an entity of absolute love and compassion, but also authority and insight and wisdom. I was humbled in his presence, and I was as relaxed as I would be with a childhood friend. We talked about my life, and while I can't remember all the details of that conversation, it's basically things are going really well. You're where you should be. You have a lot more work to do. You can't stay here. It's really important that you go back. And we're walking on the hill in the grass. And I said, that's ridiculous. Why would I go back? I'm finally here. I'm home. That this is everything I've longed for. Come on, let's go to the tree. There was a power in his presence. There was, I felt the significance of what he was saying. You have more work to do. I look back now, and I think that work is related, of course, to the relationships and the conversations I would have, because we're all here walking each other home. We're all here to help each other wake up to what we essentially and fundamentally are. But I also knew that it meant I had a lot of maturing to do. I had a lot of growing up to do. I was young, and I was 27. I still didn't know how to love really well and live really well. And he said, "It won't. You need to go back, but we will be with you." Plural, that was interesting. When I realized that I wasn't going to be able to stay there, I said, "Please, you can't send me back. I just want to stay. Don't send me back to that."
That I've noticed is also a common thing with near-death experiencers, is they don't ever want to come back. But could you blame them? Like, if you're in a space where you have no ego, no fear, no anxiety, all you feel is peace in your heart, it would be really hard to want to come back.
Because this feels very fractured. This feels awkward and clumsy and dense and inefficient. This state of existence compared to that. This is like a two-dimensional cardboard cutout. I was more alive there. That's something that stuck with me as I supported hundreds and hundreds. I've been at the bedside of so many as they died. And I know for them it'll be waking up. And the gravity of grief will be left with here, with us. So part of me is a little bit envious. And sometimes I say in my closing prayer for them, Thank you for the gift of your life and your love, and pray that you release your body release your body with gratitude, release your life without regret, and go on the wings of wonder to what's awaiting you, and we'll see you on the other side. Watch over your family if you can. Don't freak them out, right? Behave yourself. Behave yourself.
Is that something that you believe that they can do?
Oh, yes.
Sort of like the ghosts, the scary ghosts we think of. Is that a thing?
Well, I tend to think that ghosts are a complex remnant of consciousness amplified by our own consciousness, and I think there are different forms of spirit. I think the afterlife is a lot more complicated than we realize.
Episode of Round Trip Death is brought to you by Squarespace. Have you been kicking around a business idea?
Just because you have a near-death experience, it doesn't upgrade all aspects of your ego or your consciousness. I am still human and in many ways as ridiculous as ever. So if left to my own devices, I'm probably going to mess things up. Always asking for help.
Well, especially when you're doing something that important, like helping someone on their deathbed. Wow. Yeah, we would need help, because how do you know what to say? And that was a beautiful thing that you told us a few minutes ago. But, maybe they need specific advice, or I don't know. I wouldn't know what to say.
Well, I stop worrying about what to say, and I focus more on the quality of my presence. Don't worry about the words that will come out of your mouth. The Bible talks about Jesus as reassuring his disciples. Don't worry about what you're going to say. Relax. Why do you worry about anything? Be open. Be open so that spirit can flow through. Get out of your own way. I'm still working on that homework.
It takes a certain kind of faith to just sit back and wait for that kind of inspiration to come. You also mentioned the term we, and I know you've thought about this a lot too. So any idea of who the we was, that one being you were with, and who else?
Yeah, I think every one of us has a team on the other side, not a single angel or entity. I think some of us need a bigger support team or committee because we're a harder work in progress. Yeah. The nature of consciousness itself is that there is no such thing in the end as an individual consciousness. It's all a collective form of one consciousness. Because, we're getting into some theology here. If God is, and God is infinite, indivisible, ultimate consciousness from which reality emanates, which St. Paul talks about in Corinthians, that means that there can be no separate objects or entities in the universe. All of them are emanations from the one consciousness. And by that, every moment of our existence is dependent upon this reality of non-dual consciousness. So here I am, a temporary form that even after I die will continue in its own perceived unique individuation so that it may participate in the mosaic of creative enterprises of the divine. But ultimately, it's only one. I think of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane praying, may they be one as you and I are one, you and me, us and them. I think there's a mystical foundation of the ground of being underneath all of this. It's quite perplexing, wondrous, and the poverty of my words is really not going to be adequate to explore it.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And I have heard that a few times, that there are just no words to explain.
And so many experiencers, as you know, talk about that feeling of oneness. And I often ask them to explain it, and it's very difficult to explain. Most people just can't. They're just like, I just felt one with you and me and the universe and God and everything, that we're all connected in some way. Okay, I want to get back. Was there more to your experience than this, and how did it end?
I pleaded once again to not be sent back. And he turned to me with an even deeper gravity of presence, and he put his hand on my shoulder, and this love and compassion poured into me, complete understanding, and he just said, "Don't worry, we'll be with you. We'll see you. We'll see you later." And boom, I was back. So that's the hardest part.
Yeah, I've heard it explained many ways. Some people say it feels like being slammed back in this body they don't fit into.
Yeah.
How did you feel? What was it like? Or do you remember?
Oh, I felt my consciousness being compressed.
Yeah.
I felt the density of this level of reality compared to that. I felt the utter inadequacy of my thoughts, which must progress one after the other as my words do, and how utterly inadequate they are to express the deep nature of what is fundamentally real. Everything becomes distorted, right? Through perception and time and space and body and cognition and language and flesh and bone. And what I had become, as well as what I had experienced, receded from me, just descended like I dropped it into the depths of the ocean, and I'm watching it disappear down into the dark. There was no way I could keep it at the level of my egoic functioning and my perceived separate identity. It just sank down, and I felt myself reaching out and grasping for it, and it was gone. And it left me simply feeling homesick and embarrassed that I had passed out and scared everyone.
Wow, his ego returned, then immediately he feels embarrassment. That's crazy.
Again, right? Because I had passed out before. The doctors and the nurses, they took my vitals. They couldn't find anything wrong. They gave me some orange juice. And every time I tell this story, I feel it. I went home. I didn't tell my congregation. I didn't tell anyone. Because this was over 30 years ago. I didn't know about near-death experiences. So what do you do when your consciousness moves from this state and then you're expanded into one so full and connected, and then you're compressed back into this? You crawl into bed and you grieve. You don't know why. And you shove it down. And
That's interesting. I have heard that a few times with people coming back from a near-death experience and just feeling so sad that they're back.
it took me years to integrate it. And then when I started hearing about others who've had them, the memory and the feeling surfaced. As much as you're trying to dismiss it as a dream or a hallucination or a distortion, you can't shake it. It's unlike any dream or memory you've ever had. It has its hold on you. You are apprehended and it won't let you go.
Yes, that's something else that a lot of NDers say, that this is something that they will never forget. Like when they think about it now and it's been 25 years, like it's still as if it just happened yesterday. The memory is so clear, like they can go right back to that time, right back to the feeling, to the smells. And that is so different from any dream or any psychedelic drug trip or anything like that. You forget the experience, but when near-death experiences, they never forget it, ever.
And this homesickness, this love, this complete and utter inexplainable knowing of God and Spirit and continued existence. It's wonderful and it's lonely.
I love that term, homesickness. Yeah, if it felt so much like home, you miss it. That's the grieving that you're talking about. Totally makes sense.
And yet I know that I'm here for a reason.
Let's jump to that. You mentioned that earlier. You learned about your mission in life. What are you here for?
I'm here to shine in my own particular way and help others to do that too. Love is your spiritual practice because God is love. And
that is beautiful. We are all here to shine. That's it. We're here to love, and that's it. Love.
Means love isn't an emotion. Love is the highest state of consciousness, completely integrated and connected. That's why whatever you do to the least of these, you do to Him. So how I do that, or how I was led to do that, was not something quite of my planning. It came upon me. I went back to my seminary after my internship. I finished my degree. I was placed in a church. And on the first day in my new parish, a man died. And there I was sitting at his side, feeling oddly comfortable. I didn't know that was a prelude or a forewarning of what I would become. I had a church for 10 years, bumbling along, not very good at church administration, but loving to be with the people and share the stories. Then an opportunity came up for hospital chaplaincy, and I just felt compelled, and I jumped for it, and 25 years later, it's been the richest vocation I could ever have imagined.
But how do you go through helping people that are on their deathbed and not come away just depressed every day after doing that?
Well, there's a tension at play because it's what I call emotional cholesterol. It builds when you are continually exposed to suffering without relief between the cases. There's no way to process it between the cases. So yes, eventually that destabilizes your ability to function. Literally. I went on sabbatical for a year because I'd written a book, and there's the book, Beyond Surviving. And this talks about my 4 rounds with cancer and patient stories of cancer and how to engage the crisis to deepen your love and connect to that spiritual foundation.
We'll put a link to that in the show notes if people want to find it. You have another book too. Go ahead and mention it now.
And the other book is, I think it shows up backwards on your thing, but Early Exits. Yeah. So this is a lot thicker. This one is pretty heavy. It's about euthanasia, which is legal in Canada. And when that was brought in 10 years ago, it fundamentally changed the nature of palliative care and the nature of my work. And while on one level, many people said it's a kind and compassionate thing to do when people are facing unbearable suffering. On another level, I found it utterly an impoverished response to suffering. The efficient management of death through a simple injection. It turns out that the vast majority of people are requesting it because of spiritual suffering or existential distress, not because of physical pain. Yes, there are those who have terrible physical suffering, but that can be managed through proper medication, which may require palliative sedation. A lot of people are scared of that. They don't want to be floating in limbo, or they don't want to put their family through that. People are unaware of the architecture, how the architecture of consciousness and identity is deconstructed through that period of dying, and how this is an opening to your spiritual identities. Nearing death awareness, mystical states of consciousness near the end of life are incredibly common. But with euthanasia, we turn you off before you reach that stage. And I'm even bold to say I feel it's a medical procedure being used to treat what is predominantly a spiritual condition.
So you're against euthanasia?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's really interesting. I wondered how people would feel about that, and that makes sense.
I think that the appropriate response is proper pain management, deep compassion, the community to rally, and for that process of telling your story, expressing your fear, putting what terrifies you out in front with a professional, with someone who's able to help you unpack that. And these are also so common. 1 in 10 who have a brush with death will have a near-death experience. 1 in 5.
Wow, 1 in 10. That's a lot.
Who have a cardiac event will have a near-death experience. Independent of beliefs, culture, age, education. It's the greatest gift that lies hidden in palliative care. It's exciting to share this with doctors and nurses. And I presented at grand rounds at the hospital on near-death experiences. It turned out to be the highest attended and the highest rated grand rounds they've ever had. People want to know. Anyway.
I agree that people definitely want to know. And that is another reason why I've created this channel, is to make it aware to people that having a near-death experience is very common. And there's so many things we can learn from it. I hope you learned something from this video. If so, please leave it in the comments. And until next time, this is Death Stories, Living Truth. If this story stayed with you, that means it was meant for you. Follow more real conversations about death and what it teaches us about life.